So we'll wait here a little bit for people to jump on. I'm going to be using the Mevo today because I'm testing it out. We had used it for a long time, and it wasn't working at all. And I got it to work on Thanksgiving, and after it was working, the stream just shut off on me. I have no idea why. So we're going to use it for Bible study and see how it works. I should still be able to see on here if how many people are watching. I might not be able to see who is watching. I should still be able to see comments you make, although people haven't really been doing that. It's all right. So we'll see how it goes today. And we are going to be picking up where we left off in Genesis 46, actually. So I need to grab a Bible quick. And they're going to be watching from the beginning. So you don't really want to get into your Bible study because nobody's there yet. But you also don't want to just sit there silent, because that's awkward. And then later people are going to watch it, and then they're going to be wondering why you're not saying anything. Oh, good morning to somebody. So you kind of have to just fill it with stuff. But when you fill it with stuff you're just talking about until people jump on, then you always know in the back of your mind that you're just talking to nobody for now. But later, other people will be watching, so it's kind of strange. As I mentioned, we're going to be picking up in Genesis 46. I'll wait a little bit longer here. Genesis 40. I know I'm jumping on a little bit earlier than usual, but I like to get at it, maybe 10 minutes after church. Don't wait around the church too long. I was thinking about what to make later for the Packer game. I've got some basil I need to use, so I'm going to make some pesto. So I was going to make smoked chicken to go with the pesto, but then I realized that I didn't have a chicken brining. You got to brine the chicken first before you smoke it. Don't have time for that. So I just saw a recipe for pesto meatballs. Looks pretty good to me. All right, we'll go ahead and get started here. Genesis 46. Remember, Joseph has revealed himself to his brothers, and they're getting their father and bringing him down to Egypt. So Genesis 46, we'll read verses 1 through 7. So Israel took his journey with all that he had and came to Beersheba and offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. And God spoke to Israel in visions of the night and said, "Jacob, Jacob." And he said, "Here I am." Then he said, "I am God, the God of your father. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for there I will make you into a great nation. I myself will go down with you to Egypt, and I will also bring you up again, and Joseph's hand shall close your eyes." Then Jacob set out from Beersheba. The sons of Israel carried Jacob their father, their little ones and their wives, in the wagons that Pharaoh had sent to carry him. They also took their livestock and their goods, which they had gained in the land of Canaan, and came into Egypt, Jacob and all his offspring with him, his sons and his sons' sons with him, his daughters and his sons' daughters. All his offspring he brought with him into Egypt. Notice how it talked about how Jacob stopped there, and the Lord came to him and he said, "Don't be afraid to go down to Egypt." You might think, well, why would he be afraid to go down to Egypt? Well, he's old. It's a hard thing to move when you're that old. And particularly because, he had come back to the land that God had promised to bring him back to, right? After he was gone all that time in not in Bethel, but with Laban. And God brought him back to that land, the land that he was going to give to his descendants. Now he's going to leave again? It's always a little bit scary to leave home, especially when your home is this land that God has promised to give to your descendants. Jacob's got to be maybe wondering, well, should I go to Egypt? I mean, I want to go see Joseph, and we don't have any food here, and he's going to take care of us down there, but what about God's promise to give us this land? So that's why God comes to him to assure him, no, I'm going to bring you back to this land. This is still the land that I promised to give to your descendants. I'm going to be with you. If you go down to Egypt, my promise won't fail. I'm going to be with you wherever you go. It reminds you of, like what God would say to Joshua. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God, actually I think it's what Joshua said to the people of Israel, but for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. And Jesus, when he's ascending into heaven and the disciples are worried, probably afraid, what is this going to mean? He's not going to be with us anymore? Behold, I am with you always. Or as the psalmist said, where can I go from your presence? If I go up into the heavens, you are there. If I go to the deepest parts of the sea, you are there. Everywhere. And so God is saying, wherever you are, wherever you go, I'm going to be with you. I'm the one who has helped you and guided you and blessed you all your life. I'm the one that made that promise to you, and I'm not going to change my word to you. I'm going to keep that promise, that covenant of steadfast love, wherever you are. And in fact, God is saying, I'm going to use this time down there in Egypt to fulfill a part of what I promised to you. There's also just this really touching scene, or wording really here, where God says to Jacob, and Joseph will close your eyes. He's saying to him, when you die, Joseph is going to be there. This child you love, that you've missed, that it broke your heart when you heard that he was dead, and now you've heard that he's alive again, and not only are you going to see him, and he's going to take care of you, but he's going to be the one who's there with you when you die to close your eyes for you. Beautiful image that God gives to Jacob to assure him. Okay, let's keep going here. The next section. Now, that's right, I'm skipping over this. From like 8 to 25, it's just a genealogy of like a bunch of the descendants of Jacob. Okay, so go to verse 26, and I'll read 26 to 27. All the persons belonging to Jacob who came into Egypt, who were his own descendants, not including Jacob's sons' wives, were 66 persons in all. And the sons of Joseph who were born to him in Egypt were 2. All the persons of the house of Jacob who came into Egypt were 70. So it's talking about all the descendants that he has at this point. I'll tell you, that's a lot. But it's not a great nation yet, right? I mean, my Grandpa Gurgle, at the time that he died, he was only like 90-something, but he had more than that. We counted at his funeral. He had like 126 descendants at the time that he died. And that number's certainly gone up since. But Jacob is going to obviously end up having a whole lot more than that from his 12 sons and their children. Verses 28 to 34. He had sent Judah ahead of him to Joseph to show the way before him in Goshen, and they came into the land of Goshen. Then Joseph prepared his chariot and went up to meet Israel, his father, in Goshen. He presented himself to him and fell on his neck and wept on his neck a good while. Israel said to Joseph, "Now let me die, since I have seen your face and know that you are still alive." Joseph said to his brothers and to his father's household, "I will go up and tell Pharaoh and will say to him, 'My brothers and my father's household who were in the land of Canaan have come to me. And the men are shepherds, for they have been keepers of livestock, and they have brought their flocks and their herds and all that they have.' When Pharaoh calls you and says, 'What is your occupation?' you shall say, 'Your servants have been keepers of livestock from our youth, even until now, both we and our fathers, in order that you may dwell in the land of Goshen. For every shepherd is an abomination to the Egyptians.'" What a tender scene. To meet each other again after all this time, father and son, and to be able to see each other and hug each other and weep together in joy. And notice what Jacob says, "Let me die." He's not saying like he wants to die. He's saying, I can die. It's very similar, actually, to what Simeon says when he holds that baby Jesus, right? He says, "Lord, now you are letting your servant go in peace. Your word has been fulfilled." He doesn't simply mean, "I'm ready to die now." There's more to it than that. But that he doesn't even mean like I'm about to die. He just means, now I'm ready to die. You told me that I was going to see, I would not die before I see this Christ, this child. And God had told Jacob, "You're going to see Joseph, your son." And so he's holding on to that promise. They're both holding on to that promise. And now that they've seen, he says, I can die at peace now that I've seen my son. Simeon saying, I can die at peace now that I've seen the Christ. And Joseph prefigures him in that way. God uses Joseph to provide for Jacob's people, and of course through Christ, God saves us all. And because we by faith can hold Jesus in our hearts, we too are ready to go, are always ready to die through faith in him. The thing about the flocks, so the Egyptians, they mostly just do like grain. You know how like Egyptians are kind of, when you think of Egyptians, you sort of think of cats. They have all these giant, like in their like picture drawings, whatever, there's all these like cats and stuff. That's because the cats hunt the mice, right? And the mice are after the grain. The Egyptians have all this grain because the Nile River overflows its banks a lot in the spring. And like that's the only, like if it wasn't for the Nile River, Egypt would just be a desert. But because of the Nile, it's a very fruitful land, especially because they, from long ago, had figured out irrigation. So they would trap that water from all the excess in the spring especially and use it to water their fields, and they'd have, crops. But most of the land isn't necessarily super great for flocks and stuff. And the Egyptians are really just about grain, and they didn't really view keeping flocks as the greatest thing for whatever reason. It says every shepherd is an abomination to the Egyptians. I don't know exactly why that is, but anyway. So Joseph knows this. He knows that they're not super into this. He also knows there happens to be an area in the land of Egypt that is extraordinarily good for grazing animals, the area of Goshen. That's the Nile River Delta. So when you have a delta like that, you're going to have a lot of marshy ground. Well, that's garbage for growing wheat, but it's great for grazing animals. So he says, tell him that you're shepherds. You are. That's what their family had always been. And he'll give you that land, the best land in all of Egypt for that particular thing. So think again about how all of this happened here with Joseph. They all bow down to him, just like he saw, right? They find him alive again. It really shows us that God makes all things good. God makes all things well. God makes all things better. That seeming series of unfortunate events in Joseph's life, as we talked about before, God had a plan for it all along. And the plan's always focused on Christ and salvation. A lot of times there's cherries on the top too, right? I mean, Joseph ends up having a pretty sweet life in Egypt. That's a cherry on the top. The focus is always on Christ. And the focus of God's promises is always on Christ and the eternal life that he brings and the forgiveness of sins. That's how he makes all things good for those who trust in him. Chapter 47, verses 1 through 12. So Joseph went in and told Pharaoh, "My father and my brothers with their flocks and herds and all that they possess have come from the land of Canaan. They are now in the land of Goshen." And from among his brothers he took 5 men and presented them to Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to his brothers, "What is your occupation?" They said to Pharaoh, "Your servants are shepherds, as our fathers were." They said to Pharaoh, "We have come to sojourn in the land, for there is no pasture for your servants' flocks, for the famine is severe in the land of Canaan. And now please, let your servants dwell in the land of Goshen." Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Your father and your brothers have come to you. The land of Egypt is before you. Settle your father and your brothers in the best of the land. Let them settle in the land of Goshen. And if you know any able men among them, put them in charge of my livestock." Then Joseph brought in Jacob his father and stood him before Pharaoh. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Jacob, "How many are the days of the years of your life?" And Jacob said to Pharaoh, "The days of the years of my sojourning are 130 years. Few and evil have been the days of the years of my life, and they have not attained to the days of the years of the life of my fathers in the days of their sojourning." And Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out from the presence of Pharaoh. Then Joseph settled his father and his brothers and gave them a possession in the land of Egypt in the best of the land, in the land of Ramses, as Pharaoh had commanded. And Joseph provided his father, his brothers, and all his father's household with food, according to the number of their dependents. So he's going to give them this food to provide for them. They're going to have plenty of land for grazing their animals and good water, right? Because up in Israel, you got a famine, and you're going to start to have some trouble with good grazing land. But I mean, it's the Nile River. It would take quite a famine indeed to dry that thing up, right? And so in the Delta area there, you're going to have good grazing land for them. So God's really going to provide for them very well. Now look at what Jacob said. "Few and evil have been the days of the years of my life." He's not denying that God had blessed him in many ways in this life and done him much good. But he's also had much sorrow. You think of everything that happened with Joseph and everything that happened with Esau before and all these things. But notice how, he's not denying the good that has come, because notice how God keeps reconciling things for Jacob. And notice how God keeps using everything for good like he promised. I mean, he's separated from his brother because of what Jacob had done. And all that trouble, God brings him back and he sees his face. And then he is separated from Joseph because of his sons and their hatred for their brother. And this history is sort of repeating itself. And then God reconciles, him with Joseph too. But what Jacob is noting here with these words is that this world is indeed an evil place. It's filled with sin, with death, with sorrow. And I've pictured it this way before. Whatever good days there are in life, and God gives us many of them, well, the troubles and the heartache and the sins and the deaths of loved ones, they sort of pile up. And some of the things that happen are things that can't be fixed. Imagine that there are things that can happen to you that you immediately know will never change, right? They'll never be better in this life. Like imagine if you lost a hand. You're not getting that back. That's irreparable. There's no recovering from that. Or imagine if you loved running like I do, and then something happened to your knee. You couldn't run anymore. And you'd think about, sometimes, that hasn't happened to me as of now, right? But sometimes I imagine like, oh, what if that happened? Because I really love running, and I just feel a lot better when I'm running. And I do a lot of my work while I'm running, like thinking about texts and sermons and everything. So I think, oh man, what would happen if I couldn't run anymore? And how disappointing that would be. And when you really think about it, not only physically speaking as we get older, but then also, like emotionally and mentally, we begin to lose things. We begin to lose things that can't be replaced. We lose physical abilities that can't be replaced. We lose people that aren't coming back. We lose mental abilities that aren't going to get better. As life goes on, we realize more and more how evil this world is. And, I think this is what Solomon's talking about in Ecclesiastes when he says, remember now your Creator, in Ecclesiastes. Remember now your Creator in the days of your youth before the evil days come. When you're young, the world is a more positive place, generally speaking. Seems to be better. You see a lot of the good. You haven't lost so many things. The older you get, the more you lose. Jacob has lost a great deal. Jacob has lost a wife. Jacob has lost a father. I'm not sure if he's lost his mother at this point. I don't know if it specifically says when. I know, I'm pretty sure it does mention that. He's lost his mother. All these people. Sometimes we act like, oh yeah, when you're an old man like that, it's just natural that you've lost your parents. We sort of act like it's no big deal. Of course it's a big deal. You could lose your mom and dad when you're 90, and it doesn't make it less of a big deal. It's who they are to you. They're this huge part of your life. You can't get them back in this life. So that's also why Jacob uses this language of sojourning. We're here in this world. It's not our home. This world is an evil place. This life is the days of our life. Even when you're 130 like Jacob, you imagine Pharaoh seems to be looking at Jacob thinking like, how old is this guy? It's like, how many of the days of the year is your life? And Jacob's like, 130. It's a lot of years, right? He's lived a really long time. What does he say? Short and few and evil. The days of my life. He's a rich guy, right? He's had a better life than a lot of people. He calls it evil. Not in denying God's gifts, but in recognizing the sorrow of this world. It's like what Jesus says, blessed are those who weep now, for they shall be comforted. Those who put their trust in the world to come and in Jesus Christ and in the joys that will be there. And then also notice he's saying it's short, not only in comparison to his fathers, to Abraham and Isaac, who lived 175 or whatever, but also just in comparison to the life to come, which is eternal. As the psalmist says, my days are but a few handbreadths. And as like Solomon says in Ecclesiastes, teach us to number our days that we may gain a... No, that's not in Ecclesiastes, that's in Psalm 90, it's Moses. Teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. To realize how short our life is. To realize how little it is in comparison to the life that is to come. And to put our hope and our joy there through Christ. That's what Jacob is talking about here. All right, let's keep going. Verses 13 to 26 of chapter 47, Genesis. Now there was no food in all the land, for the famine was very severe, so that the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan languished by reason of the famine. And Joseph gathered up all the money that was in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan in exchange for the grain that they had bought. And Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house. And when the money was all spent in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came to Joseph and said, give us food. Why should we die before your eyes? For our money is gone. And Joseph answered, give your livestock, and I will give you food in exchange for your livestock, if your money is gone. So they brought their livestock to Joseph, and Joseph gave them food in exchange for the horses, the flocks, the herds, and the donkeys. He supplied them with food in exchange for all their livestock that year. And when that year was ended, they came to him the following year and said to him, "We will not hide from my lord that our money is all spent. The herds of livestock are my lord's. There is nothing left in the sight of my lord but our bodies and our land. Why should we die before your eyes, both we and our land? Buy us and our land for food, and we with our land will be servants to Pharaoh, and give us seed that we may live and not die, and that the land may not be desolate." So Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh, for all the Egyptians sold their fields because the famine was severe on them. The land became Pharaoh's. As for the people, he made servants of them, from one end of Egypt to the other. Only the land of the priests he did not buy, for the priests set a fixed allowance from Pharaoh and lived on the allowance that Pharaoh gave them. Therefore they did not sell their land. Then Joseph said to the people, "Behold, I have this day bought you and your land for Pharaoh. Now here is seed for you, and you shall sow the land. And at the harvests you shall give a fifth to Pharaoh, and 4/5 shall be your own, as seed for the field, and as food for yourselves and your households, and as food for your little ones." And they said, "You have saved our lives. May it please my lord, we will be servants to Pharaoh." So Joseph made it a statute concerning the land of Egypt, and it stands to this day, that Pharaoh should have the fifth. The land of the priests alone did not become Pharaoh's. It's talking here, obviously, about how Joseph basically changed the entire nature of the kingdom of Egypt by this whole thing. See, we have 7 good years, right? And you have all that excess. If you're the Egyptians and you don't know that those 7 years of famine are coming, well, you're just going to live it up. You're going to party. You're going to think, well, these good years are going to last forever. That's what it always seems like, right? Things are going good. Well, usually, eventually, a bubble bursts, right? Economy seems to be doing great. Well, eventually, it goes down again. The housing market is great. Well, eventually, it goes down again. The stock market is way up. Well, eventually, it goes down again, right? There's times when things are going really well financially, and you can usually pretty much figure there's going to be a time when things aren't going so well financially. And so, the wise thing to do is save. But most people won't do that. Most people will just live it up as if it's always going to be this way and not save. So Joseph really does save the land of Egypt by this vision that God gives him, and then by what he does going through, and he takes a fifth of everything that they make in those good years, and those years are so plentiful that a fifth of everything they make in those years is enough to provide for them through those 7 years of famine. And the famine is so severe that they don't have anything else. They've used up all their money buying grain. Then they have to use their flocks, and they all become Joseph's. Joseph's buying it for Pharaoh. And so then they have nothing left but their land and themselves. And so it's describing a situation where before they would have viewed the situation as being, we own our land, and then there's this Pharaoh. We don't really belong to him. He's our king, but we're not really owned by him, and our land is our own, right? It doesn't appear that there was any sort of tax before either, or not much of one. But now there's going to be a tax. And that's the way this kind of comes out. There's going to be a fifth. Just like before, Joseph took a fifth of all that they had during those 7 years, the good years, and provided for them during the famine. Now, ever after, there's going to be a tax on them. And that's really the only sense. It sounds a little bit like he's describing the feudal system here, like they're all slaves. But the only thing that Joseph institutes is this tax. But this does show us a few things, right? This might not exactly seem fair, because where did the grain come from that Joseph now was selling on behalf of Pharaoh? Well, it had come from the people. He made a tax. He went around and took a fifth of everything they had in the good years, and now he's selling back to them their own food, and this causes them to have to sell all they have, to sell themselves and their lands in order to have it. It doesn't exactly seem fair, but notice a few things. First, this shows that God does give authority to human governments to do things like this, even when we don't like what they're doing, and even if we don't think it's fair. God institutes human governments. They tell us we're going to pay a tax. In our country, we have the right to argue about it, if you will. We have the right to think that it's not the best idea, but we don't have the right to refuse to do it. That's not the way it works. Secondly, it was, after all, God working through the government of Egypt that saved their lives. Yeah, you could complain and say it's not fair that you have to sell everything you have and ever afterwards you're going to have to pay a tax. But you'd be dead if they hadn't done that. Because if they hadn't known, they wouldn't have saved all that grain, and most of them wouldn't have anyway. So, and now he's going to tax them again. Third, the main thing isn't about how this went for Egypt, but how God used it to save and bless his people and to preserve the line of his son. That's the focus here. And fourth, it's highly ironic that having enslaved all Egypt, in a sense, because of Joseph's guidance, and this is going to make, there's no doubt about this is going to make the pharaohs ever after this much more powerful than they were before, that later a pharaoh is going to enslave Joseph's family, the Israelites. Let's keep going. Verses 27 to 31. Thus Israel settled in the land of Egypt, in the land of Goshen, and they gained possessions in it and were fruitful and multiplied greatly. And Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. So the days of Jacob, the years of his life, were 147 years. And when the time drew near that Israel must die, he called his son Joseph and said to him, If now I have found favor in your sight, put your hand under my thigh and promise to deal kindly and truly with me. Do not bury me in Egypt, but let me lie with my fathers. Carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burying place. He answered, I will do as you have said. And he said, Swear to me. And he swore to him. Then Israel bowed himself upon the head of his bed. Jacob's insistence on being buried there in the land of Canaan is really a great testament to his faith in God's promise of the promised land. And it's a reminder of how a Christian now can confess his or her faith in the resurrection by their death, by their funeral, right? You want to give some thought to this. One day you're going to die, right? And your loved ones are going to be planning out your victory service. Give some thought to how you want that to go. Not for your sake, not to glorify yourself, but to preach the gospel. Sometimes it's fun to go walk through a cemetery and look at what people have put on their tombstones. And so much of what they put on there is either self-glorifying or kind of lame, but I love the ones that point to the gospel. When they say, I am the resurrection and the life, or asleep in Jesus, blessed sleep from which none ever wake to weep. Those are a testament to people that will come later. And in the service that you can start to think about and plan, what hymns you like, or if there's a Bible verse you like, they can really do the same thing. They can really highlight Christ and your hope in the resurrection, and that's what Jacob's doing here. Chapter 48, verses 1 through 7. Gotta go there here. After this, Joseph was told, Behold, your father is ill. So he took with him his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And it was told to Jacob, Your son Joseph has come to you. Then Israel summoned his strength and sat up in bed. And Jacob said to Joseph, God Almighty appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan and blessed me, and said to me, Behold, I will make you fruitful and multiply you, and I will make of you a company of peoples, and will give you this land to your offspring after you for an everlasting possession. And now your two sons, who were born to you in the land of Egypt, before I came to you in Egypt, are mine. Ephraim and Manasseh shall be mine, as Reuben and Simeon are. And the children that you fathered after them shall be yours. They shall be called by the name of their brothers in their inheritance. As for me, when I came from Paddan, to my sorrow, Rachel died in the land of Canaan on the way, when there was still some distance to go to Ephrath. And I buried her there on the way to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem. So what he's saying is that Manasseh and Ephraim are going to inherit for Joseph among the 12 tribes when they take possession of the land of Israel. They're going to get the double portion. And he's saying that they're going to be like the firstborn, right? Instead of Reuben and Simeon, these two are going to be like the greatest. And indeed, for a long time, the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh are going to be the most populous of the tribes among the children of Israel. So that's why there's not a tribe named after Joseph, because there's two tribes named after Joseph, his two sons. Verses 8 through 16. When Israel saw Joseph's sons, he said, Who are these? Joseph said to his father, They are my sons, whom God has given me here. And he said, Bring them to me, please, that I may bless them. Now the eyes of Israel were dim with age. Remind you of anyone? Remember when that was true of Isaac? So that he could not see. So Joseph brought them near him, and he kissed them and embraced them. And Israel said to Joseph, I never expected to see your face. And behold, God has let me see your offspring also. Then Joseph removed them from his knees, and he bowed himself with his face to the earth. And Joseph took them both, Ephraim in his right hand towards Israel's left hand, and Manasseh in his left hand toward Israel's right hand, and brought them near him. And Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it on the head of Ephraim, who was the younger, and his left hand on the head of Manasseh, crossing his hands, for Manasseh was the firstborn. And he blessed Joseph and said, "The God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life long to this day, the angel who has redeemed me from all evil, bless the boys. And in them let my name be carried on, and the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth." Notice how Jacob intentionally crosses his arms. He's old. He can't see very well, but it's not because he's confused. He's not been tricked, right? Notice the parallels here to what he did. He tricked his father into blessing the younger son instead of the older. Jacob's going to do that on purpose. Joseph's going to object to this later. "Oh, no, you got it mixed up. You got the wrong one." But Jacob is going to insist, no, this is the right way. He blesses the younger with the greater blessing. But look at this blessing in general here that he gives to both of them, this threefold blessing. Like so many things in the Old Testament, you find this Trinitarian nature to things. The doctrine of the Trinity isn't clearly revealed in the Old Testament. You just get glimpses of it. It's clearly revealed in the New Testament, but once you see it in the New Testament, you go back and you're like, oh yeah, it's here all over the place. Like when in Genesis it says, "Let us make man in our own image." But then you keep seeing this threefold repetition of things, like in the benediction. Threefold repetition, right? "The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you," etc. Here also, this threefold repetition. And it's beautiful. "The God before whom Abraham and Isaac walked," that is, walking in faith, trusting in his promise. "The God who has been my shepherd." Jacob's a shepherd. And as far as I can see, this is the first reference in the Bible to God being the shepherd of Israel. We had that in our psalm last week. "Oh, you shepherd of Israel." It's Jacob, the God who has been my shepherd, the one who's cared for me, the one who has used everything for my good. He's done this all my life. And then "the angel who redeemed me from all evil." You'll find a number of places in the Old Testament where Jesus in particular is referred to with the term Malach Yahweh, the angel of the Lord. When you find that phrase, not "in angel of the Lord," but "the angel of the Lord," that's always a reference to Jesus. And here, it doesn't say "the angel of the Lord," but the angel who has redeemed me from all evil. He's talking about Christ, right? He's talking about God, who is our Redeemer too. What do we confess in the Creed, right? In Luther's explanation, "He has redeemed me from every evil, from death and from the power of the devil." He's redeemed us. He's bought us back, not with silver or gold, but with his own holy, precious blood. So God redeemed Jacob from all the evil that was intended against him, and God redeems the lives of his servants. He redeems you and me too. He gives this blessing for them to become a great nation, but the great beauty of his words, it lies in that confession that he made more than anything, that confession about who God is and how he had blessed him and in the blessing he was giving to them. All right, let's go on with verses 17 to 22. "When Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand on the head of Ephraim, it displeased him, and he took his father's hand and moved it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. And Joseph said to his father, 'Not this way, my father, since this one is the firstborn. Put your right hand on his head.' But his father refused and said, 'I know, my son, I know. He also shall become a people, and he also shall be great. Nevertheless, his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his offspring shall become a multitude of nations.' So he blessed them that day, saying, 'By you Israel will pronounce blessing, saying, God make you as Ephraim and as Manasseh.' Thus he put Ephraim before Manasseh. Then Israel said to Joseph, 'Behold, I am about to die, but God will be with you and will bring you again to the land of your fathers. Moreover, I have given to you, rather than to your brothers, one mountain slope that I took from the hand of the Amorites with my sword and with my bow.'" So he's saying he's going to be this great people, and he's saying they're going to be so great. God's going to bless them so much that other people are going to bless people with their names. People are going to say, "May God bless you the way that he blessed Ephraim and Manasseh." Right? By the way, that slope that he mentions there, we believe, is the mountain that the Samaritans later worship at, Mount Gerizim. So remember, the Samaritans are going to be this mixed race of people from some of the people who were left behind in Israel in the Assyrian when they were taken away into captivity by the Assyrians. Some people were left behind, and those would be people of the northern tribes. And the largest tribes of the northern tribes were Ephraim and Manasseh. And that's right, this is right in their area too, where Ephraim and Manasseh were. The area up by Galilee, that's like Zebulun and Naphtali. That's why in the prophecy, the land of Zebulun and Naphtali, the way of the sea beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles, right? The prophecy of Jesus coming there. Ephraim and Manasseh are kind of here in the middle. You got Jerusalem, Judea down here, Galilee up there. Ephraim and Manasseh are two of the main tribes here. And so some of their people are the ones who are going to be left behind. And then they're going to be intermarried and intermingled with all kinds of peoples. The Assyrians like to do this. They'd like take a bunch of people out of one land. They leave some and they bring a bunch of other foreigners in. They move everybody around and mix them all up. So it's this mixed race, and they have this sort of mixed up religion too, where they've got some elements of the true religion and then some of these other ones and all this weird stuff. And they made Mount Gerizim their kind of like holy mountain, where they worshipped God rather than going down to Judea. And they'd say, well, yeah, this is the place that, Jacob won and he gave to Joseph. And they thought it was kind of a big deal. So, going on. I'm trying to decide if we'll probably stop there for today, because there's a pretty big section of quite a bit of stuff to get into in chapter 49. So we'll pick that up next time. Lord be with you.